Hello everyone, welcome to Daily English Pro, your place to improve English every single day. Stay focused, listen carefully, and try to repeat after what you hear. Let's get started.
Hello, today's podcast is The Importance of Patience, a virtue that can transform your life. And I want to start by asking you a question. Have you ever caught yourself just yelling at a microwave?
Oh, absolutely. We've all been there.
Right. You punch in, say, 30 seconds to heat up your morning coffee. And as you stand there watching those little digital red numbers count down, 29, 28, 27, if that coffee isn't piping hot, the absolute millisecond the timer beeps, you feel this genuine spike of rage.
It's a physical reaction.
It really is. Or, think about a web page. If you click a link and the site takes, 4 seconds to load instead of 2, what do? You furiously tap the refresh button like the internet has just personally insulted you.
You start checking your Wi-Fi connection, getting genuinely angry at the router.
Yes. So today, we are really unpacking why our modern brains are so terrified of just waiting. And more importantly, how mastering this really misunderstood virtue can completely alter the trajectory of your life. So I want to warmly welcome you to our deep dive today. We are so glad you're here because we're tackling something every single one of us wrestles with.
It is undeniably a universal struggle. The contrast between how we expect the world to work and how it actually works is just staggering.
Spot on. To really set the stage for you, the listener, I want to use a little analogy, but I want us to really, really feel it. So imagine you go out into your garden, or, maybe you just have a small terracotta pot sitting on your apartment balcony.
Mm-hmm.
You take this little hard seed, you dig your fingers into that rich, damp, dark soil, and you carefully press the seed down into the earth. You pat the dirt over it, and you give it a nice, generous watering.
Setting it up perfectly.
Right. You position the pot so it catches that early morning sunlight. You've done all the right work. Now imagine waking up the very next morning, marching out to that balcony in your pajamas, staring down at the flat, unbroken dirt, and just demanding to see a full-grown, fruit-bearing tree.
Which is just absurd.
It is. Imagine actually getting down on your hands and knees and screaming at the dirt, grow faster, why aren't you a tree yet? What is wrong with you?
We'd look completely unhinged.
Totally unhinged. You might even be so consumed by this anxiety that you take a little trowel, dig up the wet soil, and pull the tiny seed out just to check if the roots are doing anything yet.
Which, biologically speaking, would completely traumatize and likely destroy the seed.
Absolutely kills it.
Yeah. When you paint that picture, a grown adult screaming at a patch of dirt, It sounds crazy because we all inherently possess the biological common sense to know that a seed requires time. It requires continuous hydration, specific mineral nourishment from the soil, photons from the sun, and above all else, the uninterrupted passage of time. You simply cannot intimidate a plant into growing faster.
You can't bully a leaf into existence.
No, you really can't. You have to trust the invisible biological mechanism. Yet, the profound disconnect here is that while we easily grant this grace to a literal houseplant, we refuse to give it to ourselves. It's an undeniable reflection of how brutally we treat our own lives and our own development.
That is so true. We decide we want to master a completely new, highly complex language like English, or, we want to repair a deeply fractured marriage, or we want to climb from an entry-level job to a corner office, and we want those massive results by, yesterday afternoon.
By yesterday, yeah.
And when it doesn't happen instantly, we don't just get frustrated, we internalize it. We start questioning our core worth. We look at the flat dirt of our lives and think, why is this taking so long? Am I just fundamentally flawed? Should I just, throw in the towel right now?
And that intense feeling of inadequacy is really the defining psychological trap of our era, because we are living in an environment that is radically different from the one our brains actually evolved in.
The modern trap.
Yes. We're absolutely bathed in the illusion of instant gratification. Think about text messaging. If you send a message and you see those little typing bubbles appear on your screen.
Oh, I know this feeling.
Right. And then they suddenly disappear. And the person takes, say, 5 minutes to reply. Your brain actually registers that tiny delay as a social threat. It feels like a personal slight.
We take it so personally.
We really do. Or think about food delivery. We track our delivery drivers via GPS satellites in real time, watching their little car icon on the map, and we feel our blood pressure actively rise if they hit a single red light.
Or streaming services. Any movie ever made is beamed into your living room the second a neuron fires in your brain.
Spot on. We're being psychologically conditioned thousands of times a day to view the act of waiting not just as a minor inconvenience, but as a profound system failure.
The stakes here are just incredibly high for you, the listener, because when you strip away the smartphones and the delivery apps and you look at what actually constitutes a deeply fulfilling human life, getting a rigorous education, building cardiovascular health, cultivating resilient relationships, finding genuine peace, not a single one of those things can be downloaded in 4 seconds.
Not a single one. They're all seeds.
They're all seeds. So our mission in this deep dive today is to really tear this topic apart. We are going to explore the literal definition of patience, dive into the evolutionary neurology of why waiting feels like physical torture, look at the specific battlegrounds where you fight this every day, unpack the English vocabulary surrounding this, and finally debate a highly actionable toolkit to build this cognitive muscle.
It is undeniably a muscle. And to understand how to flex it, we have to first clear up some pretty severe definitional confusion. We need to establish what patience actually is, because society has sold us a very damaging counterfeit version of it.
Let's start with the baseline then. In the English language, as a noun, patience is defined as the ability to wait for something without becoming angry, upset, or frustrated. It is the capacity to endure difficulties, unexpected delays, or even emotional suffering without constantly complaining or losing your temper. And the adjective form is patient, which evokes this calm, steady state.
Right.
And the complete opposite, impatience, is that bubbling, acidic irritation and restlessness. But you mentioned a counterfeit version earlier. I think the most common trap is that people conflate patience with sheer passivity.
Yes, and that is the most dangerous misunderstanding by far.
Yeah.
People assume that being patient means you are just a passive victim in the story of your own life.
Like you're just letting things happen to you.
Absolutely. They picture someone sitting on a park bench, doing absolutely nothing, just staring at the sky and hoping the universe magically deposits a solution into their lap. That is not patience. That is apathy.
Oh, wow.
Apathy. Yeah, it's laziness wrapped in a socially acceptable disguise. True patience is actually one of those highly active, demanding cognitive states a human being can maintain.
True patience is highly active. Okay, I want to visualize this. It makes me think of that classic analogy of a duck swimming on a glass-like pond.
Well, that's a great one.
Right, because if you are standing on the shore looking at the duck from above the waterline, it looks like the pure definition of tranquility. It is gliding beautifully, unbothered, just smoothly drifting across the surface.
But underneath,
if you put on goggles and look below the water, you see a completely different reality.
Yeah.
Those little webbed feet are paddling relentlessly. They are furiously kicking against the heavy resistance of the water just to maintain that forward momentum. The calmness above the surface doesn't negate the intense, burning effort happening below.
that is an incredibly accurate visual. The duck is expending massive energy to maintain that smooth trajectory. To bring it back to our gardener analogy, the passive person plants a seed, walks away forever, and just blindly hopes it survives the winter.
Which it won't.
No, it won't. And the impatient person plants the seed and digs it up every 12 hours to measure the roots, which definitely kills it. But the truly patient person, they are the ones doing the heavy lifting.
They're holding the water.
Yes, they're waking up at dawn to haul water. They're getting their hands dirty, pulling the encroaching weeds. They are building physical barriers to protect that fragile sprout from severe storms. They're fiercely active. But they combine that grueling labor with a profound psychological trust in the invisible cellular growth happening beneath the soil.
Okay, but let me push back here on behalf of the listener. If being the active patient gardener is undeniably the most logical, productive approach, why does it feel so terrible?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Why does our default setting always snap back to impatience? Like, why does waiting in a slow line at the grocery store make me feel like I want to literally jump out of my own skin?
To understand that, we really have to talk about evolutionary biology. We have to look at the hardware inside your skull. Our human brains, specifically regions like the basal ganglia and the amygdala, are fundamentally wired for immediate reward.
Because of survival.
Right, 100%.
Wow.
For our ancient hunter-gatherer ancestors, seeking instant gratification was literally how you survived. Imagine an early human foraging on the savannah. They stumble across a bush heavy with ripe, calorie-dense berries. They do not think, you know what, I'll just leave these here to mature a bit more and come back next Tuesday.
Right, because if they leave them, a bird eats them, a rival tribe takes them, or a storm just washes them away.
Spot on.
Yeah.
They consume those calories immediately because tomorrow was never ever guaranteed. Furthermore, if they heard a sudden rustle in the tall grass behind them, they didn't pause, stroke their chin, and patiently wait to gather more visual evidence.
Is that a tiger or just the wind?
Yeah, you don't wait to find out. If you wait, you get eaten. They reacted instantly. They felt a massive spike of adrenaline and ran. In a dangerous, resource-scarce environment, waiting gets you killed. Hesitation is fatal.
Wow. So we are basically walking around with ancient survival software running on modern hardware. We don't live on the savannah anymore. You and I live in climate-controlled apartments. We buy our food in these brightly lit, sterile supermarkets, and we work in safe office buildings.
But our nervous systems haven't received the memo.
Exactly. The environment has changed, but our brains still desperately crave that quick hit of dopamine. They want that immediate resolution to any tension.
That is the modern mismatch in a nutshell. It completely explains your reaction to the slow web page we talked about earlier. When the page doesn't load, your brain experiences a delay in receiving the expected dopamine hit.
Oh, interesting.
And the ancient part of your brain perceives that delay as a loss of resources, which triggers a mild fight or flight response. Your heart rate actually elevates over a spinning loading wheel. And corporate advertisers, they understand this neurological vulnerability better than anyone.
I exploit it.
Ruthlessly. They exploit our basal ganglia. When you scroll through social media, you are bombarded with hooks like melt away 10 kilos of belly fat by Friday, or master conversational English in just 30 days.
Or get rich in 90 days.
Yes, they are directly hacking your ancestral programming. They feed you the intoxicating illusion that monumental success can be hunted and consumed in an afternoon, just like those berries.
But the reality is, leaning into that impatience doesn't just make us fall for bad advertisements. It has profound documented consequences for how our entire lives actually turn out.
It undeniably does. And one of the most fascinating pieces of empirical evidence for this comes from developmental psychology,
Right.
specifically the Stanford marshmallow experiment.
Oh, I've heard of this one.
It was conducted by psychologist Walter Mischel, starting in the late 1960s. It's a legendary study, but the methodology and the long-term longitudinal results are really worth unpacking deeply here.
Paint the picture for us. How did they actually test this on kids? Because honestly, testing patience in a 4-year-old sounds like a complete recipe for chaos.
It was a brilliantly simple setup, actually. A researcher would bring a young child, usually around 4 or 5 years old, into a very plain, sparse room, completely devoid of toys or distractions.
Just a blank room.
Just a room and a small table. They sit the child down, and in the center of the table is a plate. And on that plate rests a single, fluffy, highly desirable marshmallow.
Oh boy.
The researcher looks at the child and makes a very clear proposition. You can eat this one marshmallow right now. However, I'm going to leave the room for 15 minutes. If you do not eat the marshmallow while I am gone, I will give you a second marshmallow when I return, and you can eat both.
And then they leave.
The researcher then walks out and closes the door.
15 minutes. To a 4-year-old whose entire concept of time is essentially just now and not now, 15 minutes must feel like an absolute eternity. You can just imagine the hidden camera footage. They must have been squirming, covering their eyes.
Oh, the archival footage is incredibly endearing. But it's also deeply revealing about human coping mechanisms.
What they do?
Well, some children essentially inhaled the marshmallow the absolute millisecond. The door clicks shut. They simply lacked the prefrontal cortex development to inhibit their impulses.
They just went for the berries.
Exactly. Others agonized. They stared at it, they touched it, maybe gave it a tiny lick, and eventually caved after 5 or 10 minutes. But a distinct subset of the children managed to hold out for the full 15 minutes.
Ow. How does a 4-year-old do that?
What is fascinating is how they did it. They didn't just sit there, stare at the marshmallow, and grit their teeth. They actively deployed distraction techniques. They turned their chairs around to face the blank wall.
Oh, wow. They physically removed it from their sight.
Yes. They covered their eyes. They sang little songs to themselves. They instinctively understood that to master their impatience, they had to actively shift their focus away from the immediate temptation.
That is a crucial insight right there.
Yeah.
Patience isn't just suffering through the delay, it's actively managing your attention during the delay. But you mentioned the long-term results. What happened to these kids as they grew up?
This is where the study shifts from just acute behavioral observation to a profound commentary on human potential. The researchers tracked these exact same individuals for decades. They conducted follow-ups as they entered high school, graduated college, and entered the workforce.
And what did they find?
The data was unequivocal. The children who possessed the capacity to delay gratification, the ones who earned the second marshmallow, were thriving on a vastly superior level across almost every measurable metric of life.
Like what kind of metrics?
They scored substantially higher on their SATs and academic tests. They exhibited lower body mass indices and better overall physical health. They reported healthier, more stable marriages. And crucially, they had drastically lower rates of substance abuse, addiction, and criminal behavior.
That is staggering. We aren't just talking about patience as a nice, polite personality trait that makes you a pleasant person to stand next to in a bank line.
Not at all.
We are talking about patience as a foundational biological predictor of long-term human flourishing. If you cannot master the impulse for the first marshmallow, you are going to struggle in every single arena of life that requires sustained effort.
That is an undeniable conclusion, and knowing that this ability to delay gratification is the bedrock of success, we really need to transition into how patience probably shapes our daily existence. We can break this down into 5 broad pillars of a patient life.
Let's dive into the first pillar, better decision-making. When I think of an impatient decision, I think of the classic amygdala hijack.
Oh yes, the hijack.
Let's say you open your laptop on a Tuesday morning, and you have an incredibly condescending, rude email from a colleague. And to make it worse, they CC'd your boss.
Worst case scenario.
The impatient, visceral response is to immediately hit reply. Your fingers are flying across the keyboard, typing out a furious, defensive, and equally rude paragraph, and you hit send before your heart rate has even settled.
You know, we have all been standing on the edge of that cliff. But let's look at what is actually happening in your brain in that exact moment. Your amygdala, which is the emotional threat detecting center, has taken complete control. It has overridden your prefrontal cortex, which is the part responsible for logic, planning, and understanding future consequences.
So you're literally not thinking straight.
You are biologically incapable of thinking straight in that second. Patience, in this context, is the act of forcing a psychological buffer between the stimulus and your response.
A buffer.
Yes, a buffer of time. It gives your prefrontal cortex the necessary time to come back online. It allows you to shift your internal narrative from asking, what feels vindicating and powerful right now, to asking, what is the strategic long-term outcome I actually want?
So if you force yourself to just step away, walk away from the keyboard, go make a cup of tea and wait an hour, the chemical flood of anger actually subsides.
Without a doubt. You return to the email with a regulated nervous system. You realize that sending an angry response won't punish your colleague. It will only make you look incredibly unprofessional in front of your boss.
Right.
The patient approach allows you to draft a measured, emotionally intelligent reply that actually de-escalates the situation and protects your career. And this exact same buffering mechanism applies to everything, from deciding whether to buy a car on impulse to choosing a lifelong romantic partner.
Which flows perfectly into the second pillar, strengthening relationships. Because let's face the reality of the human condition, nobody is perfect. You and I, the listener, the people we love most, we are all deeply flawed. We have annoying habits, we forget anniversaries, we miscommunicate, we say things we don't mean when we are just exhausted.
And if you approach those inevitable frictions with impatience, your relationships will constantly fracture. Patience is the absolute prerequisite for empathy.
How so?
Think about it. Empathy requires you to pause and deeply consider another person's internal state. You cannot do that if you are rushing to judgment. Without patience, a minor, silly disagreement over whose turn it is to wash the dishes quickly spirals.
Oh, the dishes argument, classic.
Right. The impatient mind jumps instantly from, you didn't wash the dishes, to, you are chronically lazy, you never help me, and you fundamentally don't respect my time. It escalates a singular action into a total character assassination.
But the patient approach creates a buffer of grace. It allows you to look at those unwashed dishes and think, okay, they didn't do the chore, but they also worked a 14-hour shift yesterday and they look completely exhausted. I will let this slide or address it gently tomorrow.
Okay.
By offering patience, you are implicitly communicating to your partner or friend, I value the long-term safety of our connection far more than my short-term irritation about these plates.
That is beautifully stated. Now, let's look at the third pillar, which is building resilience. If there is one absolute guarantee in the human experience, It is that you will face setbacks.
Guaranteed.
You will experience economic downturns, you will fail exams, you will face rejection, and you will deal with health crises.
And how we react to those walls determines our entire trajectory. The impatient person hits a wall and shatters. Because they expected the journey to be fast and easy, the presence of an obstacle feels like a cosmic injustice.
They take it personally.
They panic. They adopt a deep victim mentality. They immediately look for a scapegoat to blame, or they simply abandon their ambition entirely. It's too hard, I quit.
Conversely, the patient person possesses a completely different mental map of reality. They already expect the road to be paved with potholes, detours, and roadblocks.
It's baked into their expectation.
Spot on. Therefore, when they encounter a failure, it doesn't break their psychology. They perceive the setback not as a permanent dead end, but simply as a temporary delay. Resilience, the ability to physically and mentally bounce back from trauma or failure, is fundamentally rooted in the patient understanding that worthwhile destinations require navigating a treacherous landscape.
Let's shift to the physical body for pillar number 4. Reducing stress and improving health. I think people conceptualize patience as merely a polite attitude, but they deeply underestimate the catastrophic physical toll that chronic impatience takes on human biology.
It is a medical issue, frankly.
Let's use the classic example of being stuck in gridlock traffic on the highway, especially when you're already running late for an important meeting.
It is a perfect laboratory for testing stress.
You are sitting there, trapped in a metal box. You are gripping the steering wheel so hard your knuckles are turning white. You are grinding your teeth. Your breathing is shallow. You are furiously honking your horn at cars that literally have nowhere to go. You are enraged.
But here's the biological tragedy. Your ancient nervous system doesn't understand the concept of being late for a PowerPoint presentation. Based on your physical inputs, your brain genuinely believes you are fighting for your physical survival against a predator.
That is an undeniably accurate medical translation. Your brain signals your adrenal glands to dump massive amounts of cortisol and adrenaline straight into your bloodstream. Your heart rate spikes to pump blood to your major muscle groups so you can run or fight.
Even though you're just sitting in a car.
Even though you're completely stationary, your digestion shuts down, your blood vessels constrict. Now, if this happens once a year, your body recovers. But impatient people live in this state of chronic, low-grade sympathetic nervous system arousal every single day. They're constantly annoyed, constantly rushing.
And what does that do to the body over time? Like, what are the long-term effects?
It creates a massive allostatic load, which is medical speak for wear and tear on the body. Chronic cortisol exposure leads to high blood pressure. The literal friction of the blood moving too fast through constricted arteries damages the arterial walls, significantly increasing the risk of heart attacks and strokes.
Wow.
It suppresses your immune system, making you more susceptible to infections. It disrupts your sleep architecture, leading to persistent anxiety and clinical depression.
So when we talk about patience, we are literally talking about preventative medicine. Patience shifts your cognition from aggressively resisting an unchangeable reality like saying, traffic shouldn't be happening to me, to radical acceptance. I am in traffic, I cannot change it, I will relax my shoulders.
Yes.
Dropping that massive burden of unnecessary psychological resistance literally saves your heart muscle from degrading.
It is the ultimate form of self-care. Which brings us to our final pillar. Enabling mastery. Whether your goal is to become a virtuoso piano player, a master carpenter, or to achieve native-level fluency in a foreign language.
But wait, a lot of people argue that mastery is just about raw genetic talent. Either you are a prodigy or you aren't. Where does patience factor into skill acquisition?
While baseline talent can certainly dictate how quickly you grasp initial concepts, long-term mastery is almost entirely about surviving what cognitive psychologists call plateaus.
Plateaus.
Yes. When you first start learning to play the guitar, the progress is thrilling. On Monday, you know 0 chords. By Friday, you know 3, and you can play a basic song. The dopamine is flowing. The growth curve is steep and highly visible.
But then you hit the wall. You reach a point where you practice for a month and you don't feel like you sound any better than you did 30 days ago. It feels like you are just running in place. It is incredibly demoralizing.
That is the plateau. And this is where the impatient mind fundamentally misinterprets the data. Impatient people hit that plateau and they falsely conclude, well, I guess I've reached the absolute ceiling of my natural talent. I'm just not genetically gifted enough to play the guitar.
And they quit.
And they put the instrument in the closet forever. But the patient person understands the neuroscience of learning. They know that during a plateau, progress isn't stopping. It is just becoming invisible. Every time they practice, they are thickening the myelin sheath around their neural pathways, making the signals travel faster and more efficiently.
They trust the invisible biology.
100%. They push through the agonizing boredom of the plateau, and eventually they experience a sudden breakthrough to a higher level of mastery. You cannot achieve mastery without the patience to endure the plateau.
This is the perfect bridge into our next section. We've laid out these massive, abstract pillars. Now, we need to bring this down to earth and drop it into the specific, gritty arenas of life where you, the listener, are fighting these battles every single day. Let's look at Arena 1, learning a new language. And since this is the Learn English Lab, let's talk specifically about the monumental task of mastering English.
It is a Herculean task.
It really is. Linguistic research indicates that depending on how different your native tongue is from English, it generally takes an adult learner between 600 to 1,100 hours of highly focused, consistent study to reach an advanced, comfortable level of fluency.
We really need to pause and absorb that number. 1,000 hours.
That's a lot of hours.
That is not something you're going to achieve by downloading a colorful app and tapping on cartoon balloons for 4 minutes while you wait for the bus. That represents hundreds of hours of intense cognitive load, memorizing irregular verbs, wrestling with bizarre pronunciations, and rewiring how your brain maps meaning to sound.
Let's ground this in a case study. Imagine a learner named Maria. Maria is dedicated. She has been studying English diligently an hour a day for 2 full years. She can read well, she can write emails, but she has this massive mental block when it comes to listening comprehension.
Very common.
Right. When she tries to watch an American movie or she speaks to a native speaker who talks quickly, she feels totally overwhelmed. They slur their words together, they use localized slang, and Maria just freezes. She feels completely lost.
This is the critical inflection point in her journey.
Right. Now, Maria faces a choice. Choice A is the impatient route, the route dictated by the ego. She looks at her massive 2-year investment of time, feels the burning sting of current inadequacy, and allows her frustration to narrate the story. She tells herself, 2 years and I still can't understand a simple conversation at a coffee shop. I am clearly not gifted at languages. This is a waste of my life. And she closes her textbooks and she quits entirely.
And the tragedy of that choice is that she will now slowly atrophy and lose the incredibly valuable foundation she spent 2 years building. She essentially burns down the house because she's annoyed that the roof isn't finished yet.
Oh, that's a great way to put it, burning down the house. But let's look at choice B, the patient route. Maria feels that exact same wave of intense frustration when she fails to understand the native speaker. But she catches herself. She forces that psychological buffer. Instead of focusing purely on the gap between where she is and native fluency, she turns around and looks backward at the gap between where she is now and where she started. She reminds herself of a time 24 months ago when she didn't even know how to conjugate the verb to be.
Recognizing the hidden growth.
Yes. She acknowledges that listening comprehension is universally the most difficult hurdle because it happens in real time. With deep self-compassion, she actively commits to another 6 months of daily, patient immersion, trusting that her brain is slowly adapting to the cadence of the language, even if she can't measure it daily.
Maria's scenario perfectly illustrates how patience allows us to accurately interpret our own progress. Let's shift our focus to the second arena, building a career. This is an area absolutely fraught with impatience, particularly for younger generations entering the workforce. We constantly see this phenomenon of the post-graduation reality check.
Oh, it's brutal. You spend 4 years in a university bubble where you are told you are the future, you write lofty essays on global strategy, and you graduate with a piece of paper and a mental image of a glamorous, high-paying career that begins on day 1.
And then Monday morning arrives.
Yeah, reality hits.
You realize that entry-level jobs are, by definition, at the bottom of a hierarchy. The tasks are tedious, the pay barely covers rent, and the daily reality feels completely disjointed from your high ambitions.
Let's look at 2 distinct approaches to this reality. James versus David. They both graduate with the exact same business degree with the same grades, and they both accept entry-level roles at the same mid-sized corporation on the exact same day. James is deeply, fundamentally impatient. He believes his degree entitles him to a corner office and an executive salary immediately. When his manager asks him to compile basic data spreadsheets or assist with mundane weekly reports, James outwardly rolls his eyes. He resents the work, believing it is beneath his intellect.
We all know it, James.
Right. He does the absolute bare minimum required not to get fired, spends his lunch breaks complaining about how the company doesn't recognize his genius, and aggressively job hops every 6 to 8 months, constantly tweaking his resume to chase a magical shortcut to a senior title.
And what James fails to realize is that by constantly jumping ship, he never actually stays anywhere long enough to build compound skills or deep institutional trust. Now contrast that with David. David has the exact same lofty aspirations as James. He wants to be a CEO. But David operates with profound professional patience. He intuitively understands that a formidable career is not a sprint. It is an architectural project built over decades.
So how does David handle the boring data entry?
He weaponizes it. He takes those tedious spreadsheets and uses them to reverse engineer how the company's revenue models actually work. He uses the mundane tasks to master the internal software systems.
He's learning the foundation.
Exactly. When there is an unglamorous, difficult project that no one else wants to touch, David volunteers. Not because it's fun, but because it allows him to build a professional network with directors in other departments. When he receives harsh, constructive criticism, he doesn't throw a defensive tantrum. He swallows his pride, adjusts his behavior, and improves.
And the long-term result?
Fast forward 10 or 12 years, David has cultivated deep, unshakable industry expertise. He's built a reputation as a highly reliable problem solver, and he is inevitably promoted to a senior executive role. James, meanwhile, is 34 years old, still hopping laterally between mid-level jobs, bitterly wondering why the universe is conspiring against his success.
The contrast is undeniable. Patience is the ultimate career capital. Now let's wade into Arena 3. Love and relationships. Because, let's be entirely honest with ourselves, absolutely nothing on this earth tests our capacity for patience quite like the people we love the most.
It is the ultimate crucible.
You can be a stoic monk at the office, but the moment you step through your front door, all bets are off.
The closer the proximity, the higher the friction. Whether it's navigating a fundamental disagreement about finances with a spouse, trying to support a deeply depressed friend who keeps making self-destructive choices, or the monumental daily marathon of parenting.
Oh, parenting, where a toddler might literally look you in the eye and ask why 400 times before lunchtime.
Without a doubt.
Let's focus on a very specific, relatable, romantic case study. Let's take Sarah and Tom. They've been living together for a year, and the honeymoon phase is worn off. Tom has this seemingly minor habit that absolutely grates on Sarah's central nervous system. When he comes home from work, he takes off his socks and leaves them right in the middle of the living room floor, rather than walking 10 extra steps to put them in the laundry basket.
The classic universal domestic dispute. I think every listener can vividly picture those socks sitting on the rug.
Yes. So let's play out the impatient response. Sarah walks into the living room after a long, stressful day of her own. She spots the crumpled socks, her amygdala fires, her frustration instantly boils over into rage. She doesn't just see cotton fabric, she sees blatant disrespect.
Right.
She storms into the kitchen where Tom is making dinner and yells, "Tom, how many times do I have to tell you? You are so incredibly lazy and messy, you clearly don't respect my time or the effort I put into keeping this house clean."
Let's pause and analyze Tom's reaction. By attacking his character, calling him lazy and disrespectful, Sarah triggers Tom's own fight-or-flight response. He feels suddenly and aggressively ambushed. He doesn't think about the socks. He just wants to defend his ego.
So he fights back.
Naturally. So he yells back, "I work 10 hours a day. I just wanted to sit down for 5 minutes. You are always nagging me." Suddenly, they are locked in a massive, emotionally damaging argument that ruins their entire evening. And the tragic irony is, it's not even about the laundry anymore.
No, it's way deeper now.
It's about fundamental character flaws, perceived respect, and deep-seated resentments. The socks just served as the spark in a powder keg.
Impatience poured gasoline on a tiny ember. Now, let's rewind the tape and look at the patient response. Sarah walks in, sees the exact same socks, and feels that exact same initial surge of annoyance. But she forces a pause. She takes a slow breath. She tells herself, "I am angry right now. I will not address this until my heart rate is normal."
The buffer again.
Yes, the buffer. An hour later, when they are sitting on the couch and the mood is calm, she turns to him. She doesn't attack his character, she uses I statements. She says, "Tom, I know this probably seems incredibly minor to you, but when I come home to a messy floor, it makes my brain feel stressed and overwhelmed. It would genuinely mean a lot to me and help me relax if you could try to put your socks in the basket."
And look at the difference in Tom's reception. Because he isn't being verbally attacked, his defensive shields remain lowered. He actually hears the emotional need beneath her request. And because he genuinely loves her and wants her to be happy, he consciously makes an effort to change his habit.
It actually solves the problem.
It does. Patience didn't just solve the logistical problem of the socks. It actively deepened their intimacy by fostering safe communication. Impatience multiplies a problem. Patience diffuses it.
That is a masterclass in domestic diplomacy. Let's move to Arena 4. Health and fitness. I feel like we have an obligation to call out the billion-dollar fitness and diet industry here. Their entire business model relies on weaponizing human impatience. They peddle absolute biological lies. The 30-day total body transformation. The drink this detox tea to melt stubborn belly fat by the weekend.
It is predatory marketing, pure and simple. The physiological truth is that the human body is an incredibly stubborn organism that fiercely craves homeostasis. It wants to stay exactly the way it is right now. It fights rapid change. Sustainable, healthy fat loss occurs at a rate of roughly half a kilo to maybe 1 kilo per week. Building any noticeable, dense muscle tissue takes 3 to 6 months of grueling, consistent, progressive mechanical tension.
Let's illustrate this with Anna and Lisa. They are friends, they both feel sluggish, and they both decide they want to completely overhaul their physical health. They join a local gym together on January 1st. They both commit to lifting weights and doing cardio 3 times a week. They clean up their diets. After exactly 1 month, 30 days into sex, Anna stands in front of her full-length mirror. She turns sideways. She flexes. She looks at the scale. She sees absolutely zero visible change in her physical composition. The scale hasn't moved.
And because Anna has been conditioned by those predatory advertisements, she operates from a baseline of impatience. She concludes that her effort is disconnected from any reward. She decides the gym is a scam, she doesn't have the right genetics, and it's a massive waste of her precious time. She cancels her membership on February 1st and goes back to her sedentary lifestyle.
But what about Lisa? She's standing in her own mirror on that exact same day, looking at the exact same lack of visual results.
Lisa also sees no dramatic physical change. But Lisa's approach is rooted in profound biological patience. She understands she is in the foundational phase. Instead of obsessing over the mirror, she focuses on microscopic internal victories.
Like what kind of victories?
She notices that she doesn't get winded walking up the stairs at work anymore. She focuses on the fact that she can lift a 10-kilo dumbbell today, whereas she struggled with an 8-kilo dumbbell on week 1. She understands that structural change is happening microscopically. She pushes through the demoralizing visual plateau. After 6 months of quiet, relentless consistency, Lisa's metabolic health and physical composition have completely and undeniably transformed. Anna, meanwhile, is sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, waiting to buy the next magical 14-day juice cleanse. Consistency beats intensity every single time.
It's the unsexy truth. And that exact same dynamic governs Arena 5, financial goals. This is another area absolutely rife with the illusion of the quick fix. We see people day trading volatile cryptocurrencies, hoping to become millionaires overnight. We see people taking on massive amounts of high-interest consumer debt to buy luxury cars and designer clothes because they want the outward aesthetic of wealth today, rather than doing the work to possess actual wealth tomorrow.
The irony is that the true secret to building generational wealth is profoundly, almost painfully boring. It relies almost entirely on time and the mathematical principle of compound interest.
Right, compound interest.
For those unfamiliar, compound interest is the financial phenomenon where the interest you earn on your initial investment begins to earn its own interest. It creates a slow start, but eventually forms an exponential, unstoppable snowball of wealth.
Give us the math on this, because I think when people actually hear the numbers, it rewires how they view money and time.
Let's use a very accessible number. Let's say you decide to invest just $200 a month.
That's pretty modest.
Very modest. Roughly the cost of a daily coffee habit, combined with a few unused streaming subscriptions. You take that $200 a month and you put it into a broad market index fund that returns an historical average of about 7% annually. You do not try to time the market. You do not check the app every day. You just patiently, automatically contribute.
Okay. Over 30 years, what does that look like?
Over 30 years, that account will grow to approximately $227,000. But here's the jaw-dropping reality. Over those 3 decades, you only ever contributed $72,000 of your actual hard-earned money. The remaining $155,000 of pure profit is entirely the result of patient time acting upon compound interest.
So in the realm of finance, time literally equals massive amounts of money. Let's contrast two financial mindsets. Impatient Michael gets his first real paycheck in his mid-20s. He immediately signs a high-interest loan for a luxury SUV, maxes out his credit cards outfitting a trendy apartment, and saves absolutely nothing. He looks incredibly wealthy on his social media feed, but in reality, he is drowning in a negative net worth, bleeding money to interest payments every month.
And then we have patient Robert. Robert earns the exact same salary as Michael. But Robert drives a highly reliable 5-year-old used car. He lives in a modest apartment. He diligently auto-invests 20% of his income the day he gets paid, before he even sees it. He isn't flashy.
But time passes.
Yes, by the time they both hit 50 years old, the tables have violently turned. Robert has amassed massive, unshakable financial freedom. He can choose to retire early, travel the world, or pivot to a low-paying passion project. Michael, however, is trapped in a terrifying cycle of debt and existential anxiety, forced to work a job he hates for another 20 years just to service the debt on luxury items that broke down a decade ago.
Patience is the ultimate tool for engineering freedom. Which brings us to Arena 6, our final and arguably most challenging arena, personal growth. Because trying to be patient with a slow internet connection or a rude coworker is one thing. But being patient with yourself when you are trying to overcome your own flaws is often infinitely harder.
It is the deepest struggle. When we finally summon the courage to quit and change a core aspect of our personality, like deciding to quit smoking or trying to become less defensive in arguments or trying to overcome deep-seated social anxiety, we naturally expect a linear, immediate progression.
Right.
If you decide on Sunday night that you're going to be a calmer, more present parent, and then on Thursday evening you lose your temper and yell at your kids, the impatient reaction is catastrophic self-loathing.
The internal monologue turns completely toxic. You think, I'm a complete failure, I haven't changed at all, I am permanently broken, so what is the point of even trying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the patient approach to personal growth requires a profound, radical self-compassion. The patient person looks at that Thursday failure and forces a wider perspective. They say, yes, I lost my temper and yelled today. I need to apologize to my kids. But if I look at the data, last month I was yelling 4 times a week. This week, it was only once.
That's a huge shift.
You have to give yourself the grace to stumble. You must recognize that personal growth is not a light switch you flip on and off. It is a steep, winding, exhausting staircase you have to climb, and occasionally, you are going to trip on a step. Progress is not perfection. Progress is just a slightly better trajectory.
That is a beautiful, necessary sentiment to hold on to. Now, since this is the Learn English Lab deep dive, I want us to pivot and really explore how the English language captures the incredibly nuanced essence of this virtue. English has a massive vocabulary dedicated to the concept of enduring time.
It truly does. Let's start by breaking down some high-level vocabulary. We often use these words interchangeably in casual conversation, but they have distinct, rich, and very specific meanings. Let's look at the word perseverance.
Right, to persevere. This implies an active, long-term commitment. It is the act of continuing to do something despite immense, persistent difficulty or a massive delay in achieving success. It comes from the Latin roots per, meaning strictly, and severus, meaning severe. You persevere through a brutal 4-year medical degree. You persevere through a years-long legal battle. It's a stubborn refusal to stop.
Undeniably. Then there's the word endurance. Now, endurance feels much more physical and visceral. It is the ability to withstand immense hardship, pain, or adversity over a prolonged period.
Like a marathon.
Exactly like an ultramarathon runner. They don't just need cardiovascular speed, they need the sheer gritty endurance to keep placing one foot in front of the other at mile 40 when their muscle fibers are screaming for them to stop. It is the capacity to bear a heavy load.
Let's look at tolerance. This one has a slightly different social flavor. Tolerance is the willingness to accept behavior, beliefs, or unavoidable delays that you might not necessarily agree with or enjoy without intervening or getting visibly angry. If you travel to a foreign country where the cultural concept of time is vastly different, where a business meeting scheduled for 2 p.m. doesn't start until 3:30 p.m. and the dinner service takes 3 hours, you are actively practicing cultural tolerance. You are choosing not to impose your expectations on reality.
And finally, we have resilience, which we touched on extensively in the pillars. If endurance is the ability to take a hit, resilience is the elasticity to recover from it. It's the ability of a material or a human spirit to quickly snap back into shape after being bent, stretched, or compressed by trauma or failure.
I absolutely love looking at the idioms and phrasal verbs in English too, because they paint such vivid mental pictures. Take the phrase, to bear with. If you are on the phone with a customer service representative and their computer system is incredibly slow, they might say to you, "Please bear with me for a moment while I pull up your file."
It's a wonderful phrase. They aren't talking about a large, furry forest animal. The verb to bear means to carry a weight. It's a highly polite, empathetic way of saying, "Please help me carry the weight of this annoying delay. Please offer me your patience while I navigate this clunky process."
Another incredibly common one is to hang in there. This is an idiom of deep, empathetic encouragement. If your friend calls you crying because they're going through a brutal, drawn-out divorce, or they're in the middle of studying for the bar exam and want to quit, you don't clinically say, "Please maintain your patience."
No, that would sound robotic.
Right. You say, "Hang in there." It evokes this visceral image of someone dangling off a cliff, desperately holding onto a rope. You are urging them not to let go of their grip, promising them that if they can just hold on a little longer, someone will pull them up, or the storm will pass.
But what about the language we use when patience completely fails? The English language has a fantastic spectrum for expressing escalating frustration. First, someone might be trying your patience.
Oh yeah, like a dripping faucet.
Yes, picture a dripping faucet in the middle of the night. It isn't a disaster, but the repetitive plink, plink, plink is actively testing the limits of your tolerance.
Then you escalate to losing your patience. This is the moment the dam finally cracks. The internal buffer we talked about collapses, and the raw frustration spills out into your tone of voice or your actions. You snap at the kids or you honk the horn.
And the ultimate, most severe extreme is stating that you are at the end of your rope. This connects perfectly back to the hang in there idiom. If you are at the end of your rope, you have run out of slack. Your capacity to absorb any more difficulty is completely zero. One more tiny annoyance, and you will fall.
On a much more positive grounding note, we have the phrase to take it one day at a time. This is profound, practical advice often given to people navigating intense grief, recovering from a major surgery, or battling addiction.
It is a brilliant psychological strategy. It means intentionally shrinking your time horizon. When you are facing a massive mountain, looking at the peak is too overwhelming. It induces panic. Taking it one day at a time means refusing to worry about how you will feel next month or next year. You are reallocating all of your patient energy into simply surviving and making good choices for the next 24 hours. You narrow your focus to the immediate step in front of you.
We also have these timeless proverbs that have echoed through centuries of English literature. Good things come to those who wait. Or the classic reminder of scale, Rome wasn't built in a day. But let's look at some deeper philosophical quotes. The author Joyce Meyer said something that perfectly captures our earlier definition. She wrote, "Patience is not simply the ability to wait, but the ability to keep a good attitude while waiting."
That is the defining distinction between passive endurance and active patience. Anyone can be physically detained. You can physically stand in a 2-hour line at the Department of Motor Vehicles. But if you are standing in that line with your arms crossed, seething with anger, muttering insults under your breath, and radiating a toxic energy that makes everyone around you miserable, you are not being patient. You are just legally trapped in the building.
That's a great distinction.
True patience is the internal mastery of your own emotional equilibrium. It is maintaining a calm, positive demeanor, regardless of how aggravating the external delay is.
Next, we have Leo Tolstoy, the absolute titan of Russian literature. In War and Peace, he wrote, "The two most powerful warriors are patience and time."
Tolstoy deeply understood the sheer, unstoppable tectonic force of consistency. Think of the Grand Canyon. If you take a single drop of water and drop it on a solid rock, nothing happens. The water is weak. But if you combine millions of drops of water, relentlessly falling in the exact same spot, and give it millions of years of time, it will slice through the hardest stone on Earth, carving a mile-deep canyon. Patience and time combined can conquer almost any intellectual, physical, or emotional obstacle in a human life.
That makes me think of another historical example of architectural patience. If you look at the Florence Cathedral in Italy, the Duomo, they started building that massive, gorgeous cathedral in the late 1200s. But they designed a gaping hole for a dome that was so massive, the architectural technology to actually build it didn't even exist yet.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. They literally built the walls and just left the roof open to the rain for over a century. Generation after generation lived and died, working on a building they knew they would never see finished, patiently trusting that a future generation would invent the technology to cap it. And eventually, Brunelleschi did. That is generational, epochal patience.
That is a phenomenal historical parallel. It perfectly illustrates how true patience operates on a timeline much larger than our immediate desires.
Moving to something a bit gentler, we have a quote from A.A. Milne, the creator of Winnie the Pooh. He wrote, "Rivers know this. There is no hurry. We shall get there someday." It's such a simple children's book quote, but it's incredibly profound. Have you ever looked at a large river? It never looks stressed. It never looks like it's rushing to beat a deadline.
Because the river understands the inevitability of the process. Gravity guarantees that the water will eventually reach the sea. If you are doing the right things daily, if you are studying your English vocabulary, if you are treating your partner with respect, if you're investing your money, you don't need to force the outcome with frantic anxiety. You are moving in the right direction. You will reach the ocean.
Ralph Waldo Emerson captured a similar sentiment when he advised, "Adopt the pace of nature. Her secret is patience." I love this because the natural world operates at a terrifyingly slow pace. An oak tree grows millimeter by millimeter over centuries. You can't watch it happen. Yet using this excruciatingly slow method, nature builds the most breathtaking, complex, and massive ecosystems on the planet.
And finally, we have the highly pragmatic American founding father, Benjamin Franklin, who famously said, "He that can have patience can have what he will."
A very bold claim.
But an accurate one. Franklin recognized that patience isn't just one virtue among many. It is the ultimate master key, the prerequisite foundational virtue. Think about it. It isn't just about waiting. If you have infinite patience, you can study for 10 years to become a neurosurgeon. If you have patience, you can endure the failures required to build a massive business. If you have patience, you can slowly accumulate a fortune. It is the very soil out of which every other human achievement grows.
Before we can hand our listener the practical toolkit to build this muscle, we absolutely have to clear away the psychological debris. We need to spend some time myth-busting patience because there are toxic misconceptions that hold so many people back from even trying to cultivate it. Misconception 1 and 2 usually blend together into this terrible archetype. The idea of the emotionless pushover.
Ah, yes. The idea that to be patient means to be a doormat.
Right. People think that if you are labeled a patient person, it means you have had your spine removed. It means you never get angry, you never feel frustrated, you let people cut you in line, you let your boss exploit you, and you just stay silent and take the abuse with a smile. But hold on, I need to push back here. If I'm in a toxic workplace and my boss is constantly screaming at me and demanding I work weekends without pay, if I am patient with him, aren't I just being a victim? Aren't I just enabling his abuse?
That is exactly why this is a dangerous misconception. Patience is absolutely not subservience. As we established with the amygdala discussion, highly patient people feel the exact same intense surge of cortisol, the exact same burning injustice and anger as everyone else when they are mistreated.
So they do feel it.
Of course they do. The critical defining difference is entirely in how they manage and deploy that emotion. They feel the anger, but they do not let the anger dictate a chaotic, immediate reaction. Furthermore, true patience absolutely unconditionally includes setting firm boundaries and fiercely advocating for your own dignity.
So how does a patient person handle the toxic boss?
An impatient person might scream back, throw their coffee mug, and storm out, getting themselves fired and losing their income before they have another job lined up. A passive person will just suffer in silence for 10 years. The patient person will feel the anger, but they will strategically manage it.
Okay.
They will document the abuse, they will calmly update their resume, they will quietly network, and then, at the optimal time of their choosing, they will firmly, professionally hand in their resignation, or they will calmly report the boss to HR with a mountain of evidence. Patience is about choosing the optimal time, tone, and method to address an issue to maximize your own benefit, rather than reacting blindly in the heat of the moment. It is deeply strategic. It is powerful, not submissive.
That is such a vital reframing. Patience is strategic power. Now, let's tackle misconception 3 and 4, which also go hand in hand. The pervasive idea that patience is an unchangeable genetic trait and that it's a tool you only pull out for massive life-altering goals. You hear this excuse all the time. Someone blows up at a waiter and their defense is, listen, I'm just naturally hot-headed. My grandfather was hot-headed. My dad was a yeller. I'm a yeller. I just don't have the patience gene.
It is the most convenient, lazy excuse in the world to avoid doing the incredibly hard psychological work of self-improvement. Now, let's be scientifically honest. Baseline temperaments do vary. Some people naturally run a little hotter due to their neurochemistry, but the capacity for patience is unequivocally a learned, trainable skill.
Because of neuroplasticity.
100%. The brain has neuroplasticity, the ability to physically rewire its own neural pathways based on repeated behavior. It's a cognitive muscle. And here's the crucial part regarding the second half of that myth. You do not build that muscle by only trying to be patient when you're dealing with a cancer diagnosis or buying a house.
Right, you can't walk into the gym for the first time in your life and try to deadlift 500 pounds. You will break your back.
Undeniably. You have to start with the 5-pound dumbbells. You build the muscle of patience in the micro moments of daily mundane life. The frustratingly slow checkout line at the grocery store, that is your gymnasium.
Oh, I like that.
The spinning wheel of death on a frozen computer screen, that is your treadmill, your toddler asking why for the 50th time.
Yeah.
That is your heavy lifting. If you consciously practice managing your heart rate and your frustration in those incredibly low-stakes everyday scenarios, you are laying down thick neural pathways of emotional regulation. When the massive high-stakes tragedies and challenges of life inevitably hit you, you will have built the formidable muscular strength required to stay calm and navigate them.
I am genuinely never going to look at a slow traffic light the same way again. It isn't an annoyance, it is a free training session. Finally, let's dismantle misconception 5. The deeply ingrained belief that if you are forced to be patient, it implies that something has gone terribly wrong.
Yeah.
We view a delay as a system failure.
And this is perhaps the most beautiful and necessary myth to shatter. We need to completely invert how we view waiting. Needing patience does not mean you are failing. Needing patience is the ultimate proof that something vital is currently in the complex process of growing. Think about biology. A pregnant mother isn't failing because it takes 9 long, uncomfortable months to grow a human baby. You cannot speed up the gestation period to 3 months just because you are eager. The timeline is not an error. The timeline is a required structural feature of the miracle.
The timeline is a required feature of the miracle. That hits hard.
When you are putting in 70-hour weeks waiting for your startup business to finally become profitable, or you are staring at an English textbook waiting for the grammar rules to finally click in your brain, the waiting is not a sign that you are on the wrong path. The waiting is the clearest, most profound indicator that you are actively doing the necessary hidden work that precedes the reward.
All right, we have reached the most crucial part of this deep dive. We've explored the evolutionary theory, we've broken down the psychology, and we've busted the toxic myths. But theory is useless without application. How do we actually do this? How do you, the listener, start physically rewiring your brain to build this mental muscle today? We're going to unpack a highly practical, actionable toolkit of 10 strategies, and we're going to just bat these concepts back and forth. Let's start with the immediate physiological response. What do I do when I feel that spike of rage?
The immediate first aid for acute impatience is physiological regulation, specifically deep diaphragmatic breathing. We discussed earlier how a trigger like someone abruptly cutting you off in traffic forces your sympathetic nervous system into a fight or flight panic state. Your heart rate rockets, your chest tightens, your breathing becomes rapid and shallow.
And when I'm in that state, I can't just logically tell myself to calm down. The logic center is offline.
Absolutely offline. You cannot outthink a physiological chemical flood. You have to physically counteract it using your body's built-in hardware. Taking 3 deliberately slow, deep breaths, inhaling deeply into your stomach, not just your chest, and exhaling very slowly actively stimulates the vagus nerve.
What does that do?
The vagus nerve is the main component of your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest network.
So breathing slowly is like hitting a manual override switch.
It literally is. It sends a chemical signal back up to your brain that says, we are physically safe, there is no predator, we do not need to attack the minivan in front of us. Coupling this acute, in-the-moment breathing with a broader, daily 10-minute mindfulness meditation practice where you just sit and observe your thoughts without reacting to them have been clinically proven to lower your baseline reactivity over time. You literally shrink the size of your amygdala.
Okay, so I've taken my 3 breaths, my heart rate is down, now I have to deal with the cognitive side. This brings us to the second strategy of reframing the situation. We touched on this with the grocery line, but let's use a more extreme example. You are at the airport, you have a connecting flight, you look at the board and the bright red letters say your flight is delayed by 3 grueling hours. Now, I want to push back here. In that moment, I do not want to reframe anything. I want to get home to my bed. I am exhausted. How on earth do you expect someone to positively reframe being trapped in an airport terminal?
It's incredibly difficult, and the initial anger is entirely valid. But let's look at your options pragmatically. Option A is to sit at the cramped gate, glaring at the helpless gate agent, stewing in toxic anger and thinking, this garbage airline is stealing 3 hours of my life. This is an absolute disaster. You will spend 3 hours suffering. Option B is recognizing the absolute limit of your control. You cannot march onto the tarmac, hotwire Boeing 737 and fly it yourself. You are powerless over the plane.
So the only variable you control is your interpretation of the empty time.
Spot on. You actively force a reframe. You tell yourself, okay, the universe just forcibly handed me 3 hours of completely uninterrupted time where absolutely nothing is expected of me. You can use that time to finally read that novel sitting in your carry-on, or you can call an old friend you haven't spoken to in a year, or you can just buy a terrible airport coffee, sit by the giant window, and watch the incredibly complex choreography of planes taking off.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
The external physical situation, the delayed metal tube, has not changed 1 millimeter. But your internal psychological experience of those 3 hours has miraculously shifted from agonizing torture to an unexpected oasis of free time.
It's like a Jedi mind trick on yourself. But a lot of impatience isn't caused by sudden delays. It's caused by our own terrible forecasting. This brings us to strategy 3, which requires us to drastically adjust our expectations. So much of our daily frustration is entirely manufactured by our own ignorance of how long complex processes actually take.
This is essentially preventative medicine for impatience. If you enthusiastically sign up for an intensive English class and you set the mental expectation that you will be flawlessly writing poetry in a foreign language in 6 months, you have set an impossible, biologically absurd expectation.
Right, so when month 6 inevitably rolls around and you are still struggling to remember whether it's I have went or I have gone, the gap between your lofty expectation and your messy reality creates crushing impatience.
And that's usually when people quit. But if you do your research beforehand, if you consult experts and understand that achieving advanced fluency is a rigorous 2 to 3 year marathon, then at month 6, when you're struggling with verbs, you don't panic. You say, I am struggling, which means I am exactly on schedule. Aligning your internal psychological clock with objective, external reality neutralizes impatience before it even has a chance to germinate.
That ties directly into strategy 4, the necessity of focusing on the process rather than obsessing over the final outcome. Impatient people are exactly like little kids strapped into the back seat of a car on a cross-country road trip. They are constantly kicking the seat and shouting, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" They are so hyper-fixated on the destination that they make the entire journey utterly miserable for themselves and everyone else.
And patient people are the ones who learn how to look out the window. If you are learning a language, you have to stop asking, am I fluent yet? Every single Friday. It's a binary question that will yield a depressing no for years. Instead, you shift your focus to the mechanics of the journey. You ask, what fascinating new idiom can I learn in today's lesson? You find genuine joy in the daily friction of the work itself, trusting that if you walk enough miles, the destination will inevitably arrive.
But the human brain runs on fuel, right? We need to talk about dopamine for strategy 5. We can't just stare out the window forever without a reward. We have to learn to engineer and celebrate small, microscopic wins.
This is a neurological imperative. Dopamine is the molecule of motivation. If you arrogantly withhold all celebration and all pride from yourself until you reach the final massive 10-year goal like becoming a millionaire, getting your PhD, your brain will literally starve for dopamine. Your motivation circuits will shut down and you will burn out.
So you have to artificially chop the marathon up into tiny celebratory sprints.
Absolutely. You have to create micro milestones. Did you manage to memorize 50 new vocabulary words this month? Treat yourself to a nice dinner. Did you check your bank account and realize you successfully saved an extra $100 this week? Take a moment to feel genuine pride. Did you manage to navigate a highly stressful meeting with your toxic boss without losing your temper? Acknowledge that massive psychological victory. These frequent tiny infusions of dopamine provide the necessary chemical fuel to keep your engine running over the long haul.
And we also have to consider who is sitting in the passenger seat on this journey, which is strategy 6. Because human emotional states are wildly contagious. We are mirror organisms. We have mirror neurons in our brains designed to copy the emotional state of the tribe around us.
It is a profound vulnerability. If you spend 40 hours a week in an office surrounded by coworkers who are constantly vibrating with anxious energy, who rush through every task, who loudly complain about every minor inconvenience, and who live in a state of perpetual manufactured crisis, you are going to absorb that chaotic frequency.
It wears off on you.
It will bleed into your nervous system. You will find yourself becoming inexplicably anxious and short-tempered at home.
So the strategy is curation. You have to actively seek out and surround yourself with steady, thoughtful, patient people. When you are around someone who speaks slowly, who doesn't rush, who takes a breath before answering a question, their calm, regulated energy naturally lowers your own heart rate. It's like standing near a fireplace. You absorb the warmth.
You also have to proactively train your brain to handle deprivation, which is strategy 7, the practice of delayed gratification. You cannot wait for a crisis to test your patience. You must introduce voluntary friction into your life to harden your psychological resolve.
Like exposure therapy for impatience. How do we do that practically?
You start with incredibly low stakes. If you are browsing the internet late at night and you find a jacket or a gadget you desperately want to buy on impulse, you institute a mandatory 48-hour cooling off rule. You put it in the digital shopping cart, but you force yourself to close the laptop. The dopamine spike of wanting is incredibly intense, but it is also very short-lived.
Right.
If you still genuinely need the item 2 days later, you can buy it. But 9 times out of 10, the impulse evaporates and you've saved your money. If you feel the phantom vibration of your phone and have the intense urge to check social media, set a physical timer and force yourself to stare at the wall for 10 minutes first. These tiny, daily, voluntary acts of denying your immediate impulses build a calloused, ironclad willpower.
I love the idea of auditing this process, which leads to strategy 8, keeping a patience journal. Now, I know the word journaling makes some people roll their eyes. It sounds like tedious homework, but it doesn't have to be a novel. At the end of the day, before bed, you just jot down 2 simple sentences. Sentence 1, a moment today where I successfully kept my cool. Sentence 2, a moment today where I completely lost my patience and snapped.
The power of this is not in the writing. It is in the data collection. Over a few weeks, invisible patterns will suddenly become glaringly obvious. You might look at the data and realize, wow, I almost exclusively lose my patience with my children between 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. when my blood sugar is low and I haven't eaten. Or I only get furious at work emails on Monday mornings before my coffee.
Identifying the triggers.
Right. Once you spot the biological or environmental pattern, the problem is no longer a mystery. You can anticipate the trigger and manage it by eating a snack at 4:30 p.m. or refusing to open your inbox until you are fully caffeinated. Self-awareness is the absolute prerequisite for behavioral change.
That is incredibly practical. But there will be dark days, which brings us to strategy 9. There will be days when the journal doesn't help, when the breathing fails, when you are deep in the frustrating, agonizing middle of a massive project. The initial excitement of starting has completely faded, and the glorious finish line is still miles and miles away. Patience can feel impossible to summon in the messy middle.
This is the moment where technique fails, and you must rely on purpose. You have to remember your deeply rooted why. When the friction is unbearable, you must reconnect with your ultimate emotional purpose. Why are you sacrificing your precious evenings and weekends to study English grammar? Is it just to pass an arbitrary test? Or is it because you want to unlock a dream career overseas that will fundamentally change the trajectory of your family's legacy? Visualizing that deep, visceral, emotional why provides the psychological anchor you need to withstand the violent storms of current frustration. He who has a strong enough why can bear almost any how.
And that brings us to the final and perhaps most beautifully ironic strategy of all, strategy 10. You must be incredibly patient about becoming patient.
Is the ultimate paradox.
It really is. You are not going to listen to this deep dive, close your app, and suddenly transform into a levitating Zen monk by tomorrow morning. You are going to wake up tomorrow and you are going to have bad days. You are going to snap at someone who cuts you off in traffic. You are going to rush a delicate project at work because you are stressed. You are going to say something impatient to your partner and you are going to feel like a massive hypocrite.
And that is completely fundamentally okay. Perfection is an illusion. The goal of this entire endeavor is not a flawless streak of angelic behavior. The goal is a messy, jagged, but ultimately upward trending line of improvement. You must treat your own inevitable stumbles with the exact same grace, compassion, and profound patience that you are working so hard to cultivate for the rest of the world.
As we draw this deep dive to a close, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final image. We've talked a lot about plants today, but there is one specific botanical reality that paints the most vivid, unforgettable picture of everything we have discussed. It is the story of the Chinese bamboo tree.
It is one of the most remarkable phenomena in the natural world.
When you decide to cultivate a Chinese bamboo tree, you are entering into a brutal, extreme contract with nature. You prepare the soil, you plant the seed, you water it diligently, you ensure it has proper drainage and sunlight. And for an entire year, 365 days of labor, absolutely nothing happens. The dirt remains completely flat and barren, no green shoots, no signs of life.
And then year 2 arrives. You don't quit. You continue your labor. You haul the heavy water. You fiercely protect the patch of dirt from weeds and insects. Another 365 days pass. Still, absolutely zero visible evidence that the seed hasn't rotted away.
Year 3 comes. You are still out there watering. At this point, your neighbors are probably looking out their windows, watching you lovingly tend to a patch of empty dirt, thinking you have completely lost your grip on reality. Nothing happens. Year 4 comes and goes. 4 entire years of relentless effort, financial investment, and desperate hope with zero external validation. Imagine the creeping, insidious doubt. Imagine the intense, logical temptation to just take a shovel, dig the stupid thing up, and plant some fast-growing radishes or something easy.
But then, in the 5th year, the biology shifts. A tiny, fragile green shoot finally breaks the surface of the soil. And it doesn't just grow, it erupts. In the span of just 6 short weeks, that Chinese bamboo tree rockets into the sky, growing up to 80 or 90 feet tall. 90 feet of dense timber in 6 weeks.
It's mathematically unbelievable, but it begs a philosophical question. Did that tree really grow 90 feet in 6 weeks, or did it grow 90 feet in 5 years?
It undeniably, biologically, took 5 entire years. Because what was actually happening during those 4 years of agonizing, embarrassing, invisible waiting? The tree wasn't dormant. It wasn't dead. Beneath the surface, away from the applause of the neighbors, it was doing the most critical, exhausting work of its entire existence. It was building a massive, complex, sprawling rhizome root system, spreading horizontally for meters in every direction. It had to build a foundation strong enough, deep enough, and wide enough to eventually support the sheer, terrifying weight and wind resistance of a 90-foot vertical explosion. If it had foolishly tried to shoot up above ground in year 1 without that 4-year root system, the very first gust of spring wind would have ripped it out of the ground completely.
And there is absolutely no greater metaphor for your life. When you feel like you are doing everything right, when you are studying vocabulary until your eyes blur and you are still failing the listening practice tests, when you are putting in 60-hour weeks at work and getting passed over for the promotion while someone else gets it, when you are carefully saving every spare penny and your bank account barely seems to move, you are going to feel that creeping doubt. You are going to want to quit. Your brain will scream at you that nothing is happening, that the dirt is barren.
But in those dark moments, you must remember the mechanics of the bamboo tree. The growth is happening. The energy is not being wasted. It is just happening beneath the surface, in the dark, where no one else can validate it. You are thickening the neural pathways in your brain. You are building thick professional grit. You are establishing unshakable financial discipline. You are doing the agonizing work of constructing the massive root system required to sustain the massive success that is eventually coming your way. If you are patient enough to keep hauling the water, the breakthrough is biologically inevitable.
That is incredibly powerful. As we wrap up this journey, I want to pass the mic to you for one final provocative thought. Something for our listener to really chew on as they turn off this audio and step back into their busy, rushing life.
I would leave the listener with this specific question to ponder. The next time you feel hopelessly stuck in the waiting room of life, whether you are trapped in an actual literal traffic jam, grinding through a frustrating career plateau, or facing the agonizingly slow journey of learning a new language, stop, take a breath, and ask yourself honestly, are you simply being delayed by a cruel, random universe, or are you currently actively doing the grueling work of building the invisible root system that will be absolutely necessary to sustain your future success?
Are you just delayed, or are you building roots? I love that reframing. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. My challenge to you, the listener, today is to pick just one tiny arena of your life. Maybe the grocery store line this evening, maybe your English studies tomorrow morning, and consciously practice that active, calm, incredibly powerful patience. We know you can do it. If you found value in this, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.